technology and science. Take your first step toward a future in excellence.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this next session as part of the Hindu Education Plus Career Counseling 2021, presented to you by Hindustan Institute of Technology and Science. My name is Yashaswini. I'm the founder and CEO of VoxoHub, a development sector consultancy, and I will be your moderator for today. Thank you all so much for joining us this Friday evening. I'm looking forward to an enriching conversation with all of you. Today's subject is one that I personally find very interesting: how a liberal arts education helps promote interdisciplinary learning. Interdisciplinary is a word that we've heard a lot of lately, and yet it feels like it's still relatively new to our classrooms and our workplaces. To answer the very many questions that can emerge when you put the liberal arts and interdisciplinarity together, we have with us a stellar panel today. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce them to you in order of their talks. Dr. Salil Sahadevan works on education futures, alternative pedagogy, and affordable education models in South Asia. He has written for Current Science, The Management Accountant, University World News, and the Hindu Education Plus. He holds a doctoral degree in strategic management in the education sector, and since 2013, he is with a regulatory body of higher education. Prior to that, he was serving as a faculty member in management. Currently, he explores learning experience design in interdisciplinary spaces. Our second speaker is Dr. Afroz Farid, who has 17 years of teaching and research experience. After completing her master's and MPhil in textiles and clothing, she pursued her PhD research under the UGC, JRF, and SRF fellowship. After her PhD, she worked as an assistant professor and later associate professor at the National Institute of Fashion Technology, Kerala. She is currently the admissions head for the School of Liberal Arts and Applied Science and also the head of the Department of Fashion Design at Hindustan Institute of Technology and Science, Chennai. She has presented papers in many national and international conferences and has not just research publications, but also 2 Guinness records to her name. She's an avid sustainability practitioner and a handloom and handicraft enthusiast. Our third speaker for today is Dr. Joya John, an assistant professor of literature at Kriya University. She has earned a PhD from the University of Chicago and holds a master's and MPhil degrees in English literary studies from Delhi University. Her research has so far focused on issues of environment and ecology in Indian fiction. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Before I hand over the virtual stage to our panelists, a quick reminder for all of you joining us today. We will have a Q&A session at the end of all 3 presentations, and I encourage all of you to keep the questions coming in the Q&A window. We hope to address as many as we can. Also, as with the era of online events, technology glitches are par for course. So in case any of our internets act up, my apologies in advance. Please bear with us, and I assure you we will be back and we'll pick up where we left off. On that note, it seems like Dr. Salil is the first one to face internet issues. So if I can kind of throw a googly at our panel for today and ask Dr. Afroz to start, and then maybe we can ask Dr. Salil to join in when he gets back on air. Thank you so much, everyone, and it's my pleasure to hand over the stage to Dr. Afroz.
A very good evening to one and all. Am I audible?
Yes, Dr. Afroz, please go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, so a very good evening to one and all. Welcome and thanks for the wonderful introduction, and welcome to all the other panelists here, and to all the participants here. Before I start the session, I would like to thank Hindu for organizing this career counseling session for the students, especially with regard to liberal arts, and my thanks to the management for giving the School of Liberal Arts an opportunity to present itself here. Thank you. So with that, I start the session. So, liberal arts basically is derived from the term from Latin, where liberalis basically means free, and arts basically means ability or skill. So liberal arts put together is basically developing a person who's well-rounded and is a free thinker. So it was initially started as a part of a civic life. A person becomes more competent to participate in debate, to defend himself in court, to serve in juries, and in participate in military service. So this was the reason why liberal arts education actually started initially. So it has changed its form over the years. So now, what is liberal education? Liberal education basically is an approach to learning and teaching. And liberal education educates students on subjects which are important and relevant to the social betterment. At the same time, it makes them ready based on the workforce requirements also. So it focuses on values, wisdom, educating people to become lifelong learners. And it also makes the students life ready for not just job ready. So what are the graduate outcomes of liberal arts is like they have a very good understanding and they develop and use their own intellectual resources and skills. They are very good in effective in arguments, communicative skills, solve problems, leadership qualities, prepare for lifelong service, and also personal satisfaction. So liberal arts program basically has a lot to offer. So we commonly say psychology, economics, political science, sociology, English literature, business studies, marketing, management, finance, history, philosophy, journalism, advertisement and public relation, and creative arts like visual communication and all that. These are just a few of the liberal arts courses which I've listed so that people have an idea of what exactly come under the liberal arts. This is only a small basket which I've shown here. So a liberal arts education, according to Barbara M. White, who was the secretary to one of the presidents, she says that the purpose of a liberal arts education is to liberate the human being to exercise his or her potential to the fullest. So liberal arts education basically is to create a free thinker who is totally capable of thinking out of the box and use all their potential to the fullest. So that's the basic idea behind liberal arts. So when we go on to interdisciplinary learning, now what's interdisciplinary learning? Like we hear this word everywhere. This is like the buzzword everywhere. So interdisciplinary learning perhaps is new to our parts of it, but it's been something which has been practiced across the Western education system for quite some time. So now liberal arts education is basically, liberal arts basically is a curriculum which helps to shape their opinions better. So whereas interdisciplinary learning in this, the students get to do a major topic or a major core subject as a domain, and they also get to study and learn to integrate and apply knowledge, method and skill from different subject areas apart from their domain. So this is the main advantage here. They even though they major one subject, they get to understand and study few other programs and courses also. So as a result, the student now has a consolidated knowledge by synthesizing, and he can bring together and be more resourceful when it comes to problem solving. So why do we need interdisciplinary learning? So when it comes to the world today, we are no longer disconnected. we are very much connected to everything that's happening around us. Anything that happens in India, immediately you get a tweet from UK or US telling that the next minute that such and such a thing was, and they voice their opinion. So we no longer live in isolation. We live in a world with very wide and very well connected networks. So when it comes to organizations also across the world and across all economy, they prefer students who have a holistic learning, have a clear knowledge of the 21st century work skill which is expected out of them, a good social science understanding, and the ability to correlate between what is real and what reality of a situation. So work with them. So these are the main things why we need to have an interdisciplinary. Maybe I can elaborate more on what is the 21st century work skills. So which is what the future jobs are going to demand. So we're slowly shifting from the normal job roles which a person does to multitasking in multiple ways. And the skill is not just focused to one area. Now the person has to be capable of having skill set in multiple areas. So the future job basically demands a person to be a very critical thinker and very good in writing, to have creativity and have a lot of collaboration or networking skills, have art, aesthetic, and visualization skills, and they should be up to date or should be capable of accepting the cultural diversity and knowledge of different culture. And in addition to that, they should be well versed with media and communication. So these are all the skills which are basically taught under liberal arts, which makes them very strong, their foundation very strong for the 21st century workforce. And in addition to that, an interdisciplinary learning integrates more of these points into their education and makes them more strong. So the outcomes of a person who undergoes this interdisciplinary learning is that they have a broad knowledge on multiple disciplines, the disciplines which they choose to minor in addition to the major topics which they take up. So they also have an in-depth study of a chosen discipline, a differential approach to learning, transferable skill set, the ability to apply knowledge to practical real-world situation, connecting the dots through various mental models, and habit of self-reflection. In addition to this, they also have the capacity for contextual learning, adaptable ability to think critically, advanced ability to think critically and communicate effectively, solve problems. In fact, these people are found to perform 5 times better than a regular graduate because they are trained with such skills such that they definitely have a better advantage than a regular graduate. And in addition to that, they develop a lifelong learning skill. So how does interdisciplinary education basically work? Is a student basically takes up a major subject like they usually do. In addition to that, the student selects another subject or 1 or +2 or many more as how the university or the organization offers it to them. And they study that also, perhaps based on their interest. So, so their knowledge is widened. So how does HITS go ahead in this? I was supposed to go second. So my approach was more focused towards how we practice all these things in Hindustan University. Hindustan University, as you know, is an university. So we have basically engineering technology, we have arts and science or liberal education, and we have allied health sciences also. So we are a university which has a multiple set of education happening there in one campus. So, to start with our founder, the Dr. KCG Verghese, he was a very visionary, very much ahead of his time. And he started this institution 50 plus years ago. He was way ahead of his peers at that time. And the same way, his sons, Dr. Anand Verghese sir, our Pro-Chancellor sir, our Director sir, Ashok sir, and also our Vice Chancellor and the other people, Dean and everyone are also thought leaders and visionaries. And as a result of it, before the others could start an interdisciplinary approach, Hindustan University has already implemented this. When we are still discussing in a forum, what is the interdisciplinary approach? We have already gone ahead, implemented it, and perhaps our first batch of students would be passing out from the portals this year. We have already implemented certain things. So 3 ways in which we have implemented it. The first one is the open elective. Second one is the minor and major options. Third one is the triple major option. These are 3 things which Hindustan University is practicing. So first one, which is the open elective. This is basically a part of the program. This becomes a mandatory program. So this is basically under the UGC norms, where it is mandatory for the organization to give choice-based credit system following the outcome-based education pattern, where in a few courses has to be interdepartment course or an open elective course, which is offered by multiple departments. So if you see, we are in university with, as I said, with technology, with engineering, with architecture, with design, with liberal arts. So the basket of possibility for a student to learn or explore is very big. Huge basket is available. Apart to that, we have a school of languages also. So students get to learn Spanish, French, Korean, all these languages also. So the multiple things for a student to pick out from. So they basically studies two courses, 2 papers in this. And they basically have to choose from another department or a school, and they get 2 credits for each paper they choose. So the pool is created, and the starting of before the semester starts, the registration process is rolled out, and the students pick out the topics whichever they are interested in, and they go ahead and register, and they join that particular program. And so when it is actually, it's now everything is online. So when it was actually basically when the students were in the campus, they used to go from one department to another department. That was not happening before. So there was a lot of networking, and there was a lot of mixing of students, each one sharing their ideas. So that actually helped a lot with students coming up with multiple ideas in the incubation center also, because they started speaking together, and that started them coming up with new ideas where they wanted to develop things. So it's not just an open elective, that's opened a line of thinking for the students also. So continuing, they can either take up the first semester when they, third semester when they take up the first open elective, they would have chosen one subject. The next coming semester, they can perhaps take an advanced version of the same course if they are very interested to continue in the same line, or they can select another course from the same basket, which they find is appealing or interesting to them. So this, what actually does is, this explores and expands their learning curve. So the second thing, so here I have some of the open elective baskets which are there. So you can see we have engineering topics like elements of motorsports offered by the automobile engineering department, food processing by the food technology department, Internet of Things from the computer engineering department, web design from the design department, interior sketching from the architecture, French from the School of Languages, film studies from the visual communication department, leadership skill, personality development from the MBA department. So you have all the departments here, psychology offering its subject here. We have the sociology, history, fashion design. So there's a gamut of opportunity for the students to study, specialize, and explore and learn more. So I've just put a few of the things because the slides would just run if I keep running them up. So the second option, which is practiced in Hindustan Institute of Technology and Science, is a major and minor options. So what happens in major and minor option is the student basically selects one program to study in that they major in. Apart from that, in the last 2 semesters, if they have to have certain eligibility criteria for this, the certain cutoff. So based on those eligibility criteria, if they fulfill that, they are allowed to choose a minor course program and study. Now, this minor program will be offered from a totally different department from what they are basically studying from. So they will be taking up 4 papers, and in addition to the existing course, so nothing is relaxed there. So this basically happens in the final year, and so every paper has more credits. So they, in the end of their study period, they get more extra. They gain extra credits and more comprehensive knowledge on another domain. So this increases their employability, their critical thinking skill, and their acceptance in higher education, especially abroad. So this is very much well received abroad. So this option is also there. There's like an example here. Like a student who is doing a visual communication can minor in psychology. So in the end, he might be interested or she might be interested in psychology, and they can minor in a subject in psychology. Whereas a fashion design student, instead of doing a master's degree, they can do a minor in business enterprise, that itself. So that they don't have to do another master's degree. They do 4 credits more here itself. And when they go out, they are ready to start their own enterprise or their own business. So a political student science student can master in English literature, wherein they fine-tune their English skills. So when they are applying for an IAS exam or something of that kind, that actually helps them and benefits them. The students could even minor in economics. So such things would actually boost them when they take up IAS or the public service examination. So we have another one example like BBA finance. So it's not like the liberal arts students have to minor only in the liberal arts gamut or the basket that is available for them. They can even minor in a topic which is offered by the engineering technology, maybe on a 3D printing or something of that kind, which is really, or the Internet of Things, which is really the in flavor at that particular point of time, so that when they pass out, they are up to date and they are very relevant to what is required in the job market. So the next option that we have here is a triple major. Now, in triple major, we have combined 3 programs. So psychology, political science, economics is one course. Second one is law, political science, and economics. The third one, which we started first with, was English, sociology, and psychology. So what happens is, instead of students just studying and majoring in one program, they study the core subjects of all the 3 majors. So you can understand the density or the strength of this program is very strong. So they major in 3 programs at one time, and they get a degree as BA in psychology, political science, and economics as a triple major. So that's it's very challenging to take up this course, but this is very much curated for the achievers who, when they want to pass out itself, want to have an extra advantage compared to their peers. So they have this, so when the company approaches them or when they apply a job, so definitely a person with such a background is well received. This also, not only initially when they take up a job is more accepted, but apart from that, if based on the discussions we've had with corporates, those who want to grow very high in their level in corporate line, so for them, a knowledge of all these things like a law, political science, economics really gives them a boost later on in their career, because they have a very strong foundation on 3 things, not just one thing. So that really gives them a boost. So such kind of programs, this is the ways in which we are promoting interdisciplinary learning at Hindustan Institute. So what is our aim? Our aim is that the graduates graduate out with broader perspectives on things around them, improve the ability to think critically, to understand issues beyond the traditional discipline boundaries from different viewpoints, collaborate harmoniously with their co-workers from different backgrounds, have an enhanced ability towards individual and company's growth and productivity. The employers can adopt, they can always continue to learn and keep pace with the rapid technological development, which is seen most of the time. So I have a quote from David Kims, who's the former CEO of the Xerox Corporation, which actually speaks very in a nutshell about the interdisciplinary learning and why it is needed and why liberal arts. The only education that prepares us for change is an liberal education. In period of change, narrow specification condemns us to inflexibility, precisely what we do not need. We need flexible intellectuals to be problem solvers and to be able to continue learning over time. So that basically sums it up. Before that, I have one more person to introduce here. So this person is very well renowned. So he is like the absolute free thinker of our times. He is the best, and he is none other than Elon Musk. So he is one of the most radical thinkers and the best in this line. He is the one of the richest person right now. If you look at his graduation, he basically did his bachelor's degree in economics and physics. So he had majored in 2 subjects. not just one. He wanted to do further in masters, but then his basics of foundation was so strong because he had majored in 2 subjects. So he didn't continue further. He focused on his enterprises and entrepreneurship part of it. So when you have a person who in his 90s went such a thing, he's a radical thinker in all ways. So a person who in his 90s decided he wanted to major in 2 subjects, and that to an interdisciplinary kind of an education which he'd taken up, perhaps is the reason for one of his strengths for him to come out in such a way. So he thought at that particular period of time itself. So we at this particular point of time cannot emphasize the importance looking at as growth. I suppose I complete my answer to that. Yes, interdisciplinary learning in liberal arts is a must, and that is the way forward. And thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And to all of you, stay safe and stay blessed.
Thank you so much, Dr. Afroz. I would like to invite Dr. Salil to speak next. Just before that, a quick announcement. Please keep the questions coming in the Q&A box. I see that some of you are asking why they haven't been answered yet. We will be addressing question answers after all 3 speakers speak. But until that point, please do keep them coming and we will try and address as many as we can. Dr. Salil, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Susani. Am I audible? I hope I'm audible clearly.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Professor Afroz was giving a very specific example from their university. How do they do that? I'll take a step back and look at how this is multidisciplinary learning. A lot of talk is going on the interdisciplinary learning part also. And what is the fundamental difference? And why, if it is so important, why it is not happening across this country? What are the barriers that we are facing? And what does it all means to an individual student and a parent? So I'll take just a couple of minutes to understand, make you understand the knowledge is fluid. It's a very, very pervading, ever pervading. So when a business problem comes, it comes as a business problem. We attribute that to a human resource problem or a pricing problem or a marketing problem or the like. So similarly, when a social problem comes, for example, COVID, a medical problem comes, it comes as a medical problem. We attribute that related to a virus and connected economic problem and other issues. In other words, knowledge is interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary in its real form. But we, for our convenience for teaching, convenience for learning, probably convenience for communicating, we connect that or disconnect that and make it into different compartments. Probably we might have heard that certain institutions, particularly in India of late, in the last 1 decade, we can see some institutions started using the term area instead of using the term departments. Because when I hear the term department, I always think of a compartment. And when you think about area, an area has a no definite start or no definite end. It just perverts. So that means it spreads and overlaps in different levels with different levels of integration. So we see that when we say, one of the easiest example which I always got with my students also is that it's not an academic view, but it's just a common sense parental view or maybe a general view that you think of fruit salad, which is multidisciplinary. That's why we are able to differentiate apple, orange, or a cream separately. But we think of smoothie, we cannot differentiate that. It is all integrated together. So smoothie is more akin to interdisciplinary, while fruit salad is more akin to multidisciplinary. That is important because 20 years back, if you ask biochemistry, it was a multidisciplinary subject. It is no more a multidisciplinary subject right now because they have taken an independent domain right now. Now look at the other courses. Some of the courses the earlier Professor Dr. Afroz has mentioned. Think about digital humanities, computation sociology, probably behavioral sciences, behavioral finance, linguistic computing. And in ICER, they have econophysics recently started. In all those things, what we see generally is that we are moving from an interdisciplinary paradigm towards what is interdisciplinary today may not be interdisciplinary tomorrow. The point is disciplines are evolving, mixing, dating, and marrying together. But many departments and many domains and many institutions, I should say, they are not realizing it. However, this liberal arts, mostly it's an exception. The reason is that if you see the content of the liberal arts in some of the institutions now, and 24 years back, there is phenomenal difference. Liberal arts, the term itself, we can see it is plural. So the many aspects of knowledge are involved in that. Now I am going back to my first question. If liberal arts is so important, why it is not happening widespread way? Then we will see what is this implication for students and parents. So there are primarily three reasons which we point out generally. We have written on that also. One is that our structures, our disciplinary structures, our institutional structures are built around individual monodisciplines. Of course, there are exceptions. There can be certain schools for interdisciplinary arts and science, but in general, our structures are around disciplines. And second factor is that there is a binary, and I say binary, I mean a duality. A duality, people ask the question generally whether I want to be a specialist or I want to be a generalist. And most of us want to be a specialist. Most of the students want to be a specialist. Our culture is favored towards specialist. Specialism, generally, if you look at specialism, is like a well. You have a deep well. They know many things about a single thing. And generalist is like a lake. They know something about many things, like a jack of all trades, the master of none. But if someone asks you recently, if whether you go for a generalist and specialist, and sometimes liberal arts people say it is more of a generalist. The answer is no, because the question is wrong. Because the question presupposes that you should be either a specialist or a generalist, and liberal arts is a generalist position. Absolutely wrong. Because there is always a third option for a deep generalist. It is like a valley, not a lake, not a well, just like a valley. So there is a possibility to get expertise and specialization in 2 or 3 areas in depth, like a specialist, and combining the benefit of a generalist also. In a sense, it gives you specializing in 2 or 3 areas and benefiting by a combination. And liberal arts gives lot chance for enacting that in the real world. That's the second reason. That's what I call by a dichotomy. And the third reason is that there are a lot of pedagogical reasons. When I say pedagogical reasons, the most of the mainstream pedagogy generally fits into a single discipline. That's how probably I was trained, or some of you as parents were trained, or maybe most of the teachers are trained. But things have changed because we are used to it. That's why we are difficult to change. Liberal arts teaching has a lot to do with the pedagogy, how the pedagogy is being implemented. So it has a certain way of teaching, emphasizing on active learning. I don't prefer to use the term critical learning, but still, of course, critical learning, student-faculty collaboration, independent inquiry, and many other things. And if you see, we can even give a list of that: learning communities, interdisciplinary integrative courses, team-taught courses, capstone, e-portfolio, service learning. But now the problem is that if you see the list which I'm telling, these are all fundamentally practices. That is the difference happening. One of the most important feature of liberal arts education is its core is not discipline. Its core is practices. And practices makes it unique. In other words, the pedagogical model of liberal arts, if ideally done, every institution is not happening, but if ideally done, the pedagogical model of liberal arts is so powerful that it is inherently interdisciplinary. So this is the point. And I'm sure Dr. Joya will be having an interaction with you on the interwoven learning teaching approach which they are doing. But before that, let me also tell you, from a parental perspective, the 3 generally ignored realities by students and parents, or most of us for that matter. So one is that the case of a late bloomer. So we are living in a culture. My neighbor was enrolling him as a student for 5th standard for the IIT JEE preparation. And even prior to that, somebody else is doing that. We have a competitive set of competitive examination, and we're all driving towards that. So absolutely, there is no issue in that. But one important factor missed out here is that many students are late bloomers. So they will get their own interest and capability and clarity about that only a later year in your life. Some of us are like that only. Maybe you might have heard about child prodigies. In reality, there are more late bloomers than child prodigies, but we don't realize it. So they are called late bloomers. So well-known experts were really late bloomers. Many of them, many examples we can tell. So you may have heard about maybe it is sensible to keep all the options open unless we get a clarity on that. It's not a bad thing. So liberal arts suits for that particular kind of late bloomers. And another factor is that maybe only in films that we see, the assumption is that I have a pre-existing passion even from the beginning, and I read on that, work on that. I get enrolled in a course in that. I get placed in that area exactly in the same course, same job which I am looking for. There is a linearity which we are assuming. That linearity has already lost. Let us understand that fact. It may be a little difficult for us to accept that. So, but that linearity has lost even 3 years back. It's an outdated thought that linearity happens only in films. But what we can do is that, there are different reasons why this linearity is lost. For example, the work pattern is emerging, artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, and the entire story behind it. All these new patterns force us to change why the linearity is not a certainty. So the net effect of this lack of linearity or lack of certainty is that which we are once assumed is that education or career is no longer holding each other cognitively inflexible, threaded into a single specimen. That may not happen. So therefore, it is again sensible to have a broad-based plan so that we can pivot it and remain fluid and agile in an evolving job market. In tennis players, they use a particular term called pivoting. So in business also we use the term pivoting. So someone says the best career strategy is to keep an emerging strategy. And to be emerging, you need wider range of topics that fascinates you. And if you block those wider range of topics at the beginning, when just after the +2, probably there is a risk factor in that. And that is also where the role of liberal arts is very prominent in ensuring interdisciplinary learning. I will take 1 more minute. I'll just brief you the research advantage also, since I'm from the research area. So liberal arts allow us to combine research together. Probably somebody was telling that maybe there's you can visit the website, the Stanford Literary Lab, or similar institutions in India or abroad. Something which was done for decades of experiments or decades of digitization work, now we can do within weeks or months. So the digital technologies in research in traditional liberal arts subjects, for example, in humanities, can be done at very high speed and very high scale. And are we thinking these are done by engineers? No. Last year, there is statistics that Google has recruited liberal arts persons. So when we say it is done by from engineers, the problem is that it is purely a reductionist approach. In coming years, liberal arts students will be having additional skill set, not the traditional liberal arts students. Additional skills will be having an extra advantage in entering into this market. Probably Dr. Joya will be able to, she'll be in a better stance to explain the new content of liberal arts, which includes the STEM, quantitative, data analysis, digital technologies, all those stuff. I'll take up questions towards the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Salil, for a very vibrant talk filled with lots of metaphors and analogies. Our last speaker for today is Dr. Joya. I will hand over the virtual mic to you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, sure.
So thank you, Yashaswini, and to my fellow panelists and the Hindu and Hindustan Institute of Technology and Science for organizing this panel discussion and giving me the opportunity to speak. So I'm going to take a slightly different tack to some of the questions because I'm also keeping an eye on what's coming up in the chat box. So our specific task today is to sort of to understand what are liberal arts, what is liberal arts education and interdisciplinary learning and their relationship. And you've got some answers from Dr. Afroz and some sort of directions from Dr. Salil. And I want to argue that liberal arts education by itself can very quickly be reduced to some kind of skill set necessary for employability in the 21st century. And that interdisciplinarity also risks being explained as simply just some kind of internal development and research into complex problems. And there's a reason why they have to both be in dialogue. But first, let's look at that term liberal. And there has been an understanding in modern educational philosophy, even from at the time that the disciplines were being institutionalized in the West and even in post-independence India, that education has to be more than the sum of its parts. And it's this quest for this elusive quality which has been called many names, and we're seeing a new avatar of it today. But the names such as humanist, critical, integrative, and liberal are all sort of getting to this sort of dilemma of what education should be. There are also many traditions of liberal arts. And while we are laboring in the shadow of the American model, there is a specificity to the liberal arts discussion in the Indian landscape that we have to be attentive to. So one prominent narrative that sort of comes across is that the need for liberal arts education is because there are, the demands of industry and that the global landscape of careers has changed. Just to give you an example of the kinds of messaging that's coming out there, there's a 2016 sort of survey by Bloomberg, which sort of looked at business houses and recruiters from various companies, asking them what skills they were sort of looking for and what they couldn't find. And most of them listed creative problem solving, leadership skills, strategic thinking, and communication skills as less common but more desirable skills. And as some of my colleagues who have worked in startups will also be able to vouch for, is that there is this glaring sort of lack of basic communication skills and writing. But I want to be careful with such a narrative, or to turn, the indeterminacies of the marketplace that face youth into some kind of celebratory story of, being ready to take whatever comes. And I think that that's a partial story because, and this has also led to a misunderstanding that what's being sort of touted as liberal arts education will actually lead to the dilution of disciplinary rigor, which is a concern that even my institution has, that it will lead to the erasure of education as public good, and that it is actually a way of pushing a neoliberal agenda. So we have to be careful about how we think about liberal arts education. And so I'm going to try to sort of create a clearing by talking about my experience at Kriya University, and describe to you what a liberal arts education looks like institutionally. We are 2 years in, we're still in embryo and a work in progress. And I think how we understand interdisciplinarity can make liberal arts education socially accountable. The way we're going to understand interdisciplinarity is where the nub of the problem lies. So at Kriya, the interpretation of liberal arts education has been to offset or at least delay that single stream route or professionalization by a sort of to delay by a year and to introduce all first years into a year-long orientation to a series of what we call core and skills courses consisting of design and computational thinking, mathematical reasoning, methods of literary and historical studies, writing and communication, and philosophical approaches. And this is augmented by the absence of conventional departments. We have 3 main divisions, but no departments. And the attempt is to also bring together teaching and research. Typically, you have teaching colleges and then research institutes, but Kriya is trying to bring them together, as well as the creative arts. So we can talk in more detail about how the majors, the joint majors, and even things like the 3rd year capstone thesis are sort of trying to build and push this, this sort of the significance of a liberal arts orientation. And it's really a good understanding of what interdisciplinary developments can mean that will actually and that can protect these courses or this kind of education from becoming just a shopping list of courses. So I come from a discipline of literary studies, as Yashaswini has told you, and historically it's a discipline that has almost always agonized about its status as a pure discipline. Is it a science? Is it not? What does it bring to the table, etc.? And it's really interdisciplinary developments within literary studies that has allowed me to demonstrate to students that literary studies is not just about reading poetry or writing beautiful prose. It's an eye-opener for students to see that, literary studies, for example, in the early 20th century, the pioneering efforts came from linguistics, or that literary studies actually draws intensively on cultural and media studies. It's also liberating for students to see that even a sociology of caste might be important when we read a literary text in the classroom. So in other words, what I'm saying is that how the way one understands interdisciplinarity makes it possible to connect text, discipline to context. And I think more than anything else, students struggle to see the connection between disciplines and their own lives. And this is what interdisciplinarity, at least for me, makes possible in the classroom. But there's another domain where the link between liberal arts education and interdisciplinarity has become important. And that is in the understanding of complex problems that are emerging, say, like environment or climate change, public health, etc. And I think that Kriya University is poised to do something distinct here too. So many have argued that, say, for example, environmental studies, and we are putting together a major on environmental studies, is inherently interdisciplinary because it's sort of climate change is a disciplinary object that really becomes available only when different disciplines sort of have an interface. And I also think it's important to think about the role of arts and literature in this new interdisciplinary field, and Kriya is doing that. And this is sort of evident in the course that I taught, which is an environmental communication course, where students are sort of made to see that they kind of come to the understanding that purely technocratic or analytical approaches to developmental goals are precisely the reason why we face environmental crises today. And that when they think about environmental issues, what they also have to think about are sort of some of questions of historical perspective, aesthetics, and the communicability of science. How do you communicate science? Because without these skills, disciplinary knowledge really can become undemocratic and managerial. So in short, we need liberal arts education and competing meanings of interdisciplinarity, not because industry is interested in critical thinking and communicative skills. We need to be interdisciplinary also because our contextual social worlds are continuing to and will continue to put pressure on industry and on the university to be responsive to social realities. And at least that's what I endeavor to show in my teaching. So, of course, larger questions remain about the scope of the liberal arts experiment in the private university. What will, say, for example, funding and recognition look like? I know some of you have asked questions of financial aid. And also there are questions of how will research and teaching work together? But these are questions that are yet to be answered. And I think I'll just stop here and take questions with my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joya. I'll actually ask you to just pause and I will address the first question to you, followed by a question to Dr. Afroz. One of the big questions that are coming up in the chat is about how teachers incorporate multidisciplinary learning within the classroom. especially in an era where all of you are teaching online, and that makes life quite difficult. So what does interdisciplinary learning look like in a classroom, especially in an online classroom?
So as I indicated to you, for example, at least for literary studies, one of the sort of core and skills, one of the core courses that we teach for all first years is called simply Literature and the Arts. And this has been sort of, students have told me that they've come to the course thinking that this would be about sort of, reading poetry, sort of, dwelling on the beauty of words, but that they have been, that's been eye-opening for them to find that you can actually read anything from a World Bank report document to an advertisement, to think about how text and language and discourse is being shaped in our present context. So at least for me, depending on where I see those gaps in the way students think about the discipline that I'm teaching, is where I draw on interdisciplinary resources like cultural studies, like sociology, or linguistics to amplify that.
Great, thank you so much. And Dr. Afroz, there is a lot of anxiety and interest in knowing what job opportunities for an interdisciplinarian might be. What has been your experience, and what kind of jobs can we get if we are an interdisciplinary student?
So when you are specifying in one particular major, like Dr. Salil was telling, it is no longer a liberal arts means you never work in one particular track throughout, like as he was trying to explain that. So most of the time you tend to jump tracks. You turn to understand once you start a program that is not the subject which you are really actually interested on, and something else is interesting you. So that ideas, that instinct kicks in a little later. So immediately you cannot keep changing things in between the education. That's where this kind of interdisciplinary kind of learning also helps, because you can study that also side by side and major in that or minor in that, or have an idea about that subject and then go in that track. So a student who is doing interdisciplinary is first of all multiple skills they learn. They just don't communicate with their department, so it is not just one department or domain specific. Their thinking and their learning is also widened, their networking is widened. They interact, like as I was telling, when the students started doing the interdisciplinary course, they interacted with their colleagues and the other kids from the other departments. So they started working in incubation center on small ideas and stuff to come up with their own products and stuff. So that kind of a networking happens. So that's very crucial. Networking is the future. Before and all, it was like you and your books was kind of the way we were brought up, and the library perhaps. Now it is not that. It's networking which is basically making them go ahead. So we don't have to make a pathway. They will find their own pathway. There is nothing like the traditional pathway, like they have to go through this. As and when the job portfolios keeps changing. So a few years ago, there was nothing called as a fashion influencer. Now fashion influencers are huge in the fashion line. Everybody wants to become an Instagrammer with a huge fan following and all those things. So things are changing. With that, people based upon their interest can go into multiple lines. So instead of a narrow line, the venues are open.
Great, thank you so much. And Dr. Salil, a slightly more technical question for you. The NEP recently has said that liberal arts courses should be integrated into professional programs like engineering and medicine and so on. There is a concern that because of that, core courses will lose some of the time and space that they have within the curriculum. What would you like to say about that?
Thanks for asking. That's a very wonderful, great question. I will take an example of experiential learning. There is a lot of talk going on the experiential learning in and around the country. And in the name of internship, in the name of apprenticeship, there is a lot of experiential learning component. It's already embedded in many of the institutions. But if you look at the details, it's just like opening an onion. The experiential component, it is not enough integrated properly into that. So when you ask whether liberal arts should be a part of the professional courses, it depends on how do we make it enacted. So there can be, in a scale of 1 to 10, you can make it enacted in a highly inclusive way, in an integrated way. You can make it as an add-on course, add-on kind of mechanism. So it's a spectrum. In that spectrum, how these pedagogical integrations are being made. NEP didn't plan at that level. NEP is a draft of, it is a document only. And how each institution have the freedom, if they have the freedom, of course, what kind of academic ambience and cultural context they have. Based on that only we can tell whether it will be coming in a big way or in a very ritual way. Chances are that the institutions who have a supporting culture, very highly good academic ambience, flexibility in their cognitive thoughts, the leadership, in those institutions, no problem will happen. It will well turn out on the road. But otherwise, there are issues need to be handled.
Great, thank you so much. I think we have a little bit of time for one more round of questions. I have one more for each of you, so I'll come back to Dr. Joya. You had touched upon, how the interdisciplinary space in India is borrowed from American systems and so on. Isn't the interdisciplinary education and liberal arts education more suited for Western countries rather than conventional societies in India, where job markets are still not as flexible and dynamic as they should be? Ask someone in the audience. So I'd ask you to address that, please.
I don't think so. I think that one of the reasons why we are debating liberal arts education is because the institutions that were set up in at least the 20th century were geared towards certain national goals and developmental goals, and that target has shifted. And the reason why the global market or the global sort of landscape of is sort of looking to liberal arts is also because of the way the global South has shaped up, the tensions that have appeared within, say, the ways in which globalization has been foisted on the global South. Why are companies looking for, where did, say, the corporate social responsibility discourse emerge from? Or where does critical thinking and the value of communication skills come from? And that's why I'm saying that they come from the social, they come from these moments of conflict that actually that demand interdisciplinary, that make industry respond to these pressures. So it's not as if these skills are being required in isolation. There's a reason why anthropologists or literary studies scholars, students are being picked up or snapped up in companies that are recruiting. It's because they have this ability to understand social contexts.
Thank you so much. Dr. Afroz, for you, how does one think or teach out-of-the-box thinking within campuses? How are universities producing students who think out of the box?
Right now, if you say national education policy, okay, somebody had asked a question on that. One of the things which they had insisted was on design thinking or creative thinking. So when that is a part of the education insisted for the school children itself, it's like mandatory that the undergrad students and graduate students also explore that same kind of a thing. So it's not like in-box or out of the box and kind of a thing. It's just the way in which you handle a situation. It's just a word which is termed. How you, instead of thinking of an answer in one particular time, if you can find a solution to that same problem in multiple ways, perhaps you can address that issue better. So perhaps you might have a better solution if you think from a different angle. That perspective you get when you do an interdisciplinary, because it broadens your risk. Like if you take all our ancient Greek people and all Aristotle, or let's take Leonardo da Vinci, they're all not in just one track. They were handling multiple things. So their approach to a particular solution was not from one angle. They tried to approach it through multiple angles. That's a kind of an education with this liberal arts and interdisciplinary education is trying to give. And the critical thinking and design thinking is one of the things which is being insisted. And yeah, that's implemented for all the engineering programs. Soon, perhaps for all the liberal arts also, we'll start implementing the design thinking program. Yeah.
Thank you. And last question of today for Dr. Salil, a generic broad-based question. the rise of interdisciplinary education and liberal arts education is a relatively new phenomenon in India, over the last decade or so. How has that impacted the kind of students and professionals that emerge from our country? How are we better off today than we were 30, 35 years ago?
Wonderful question. In fact, if you look at how the Stoic philosophy is coming back, is making a wave by the books of Rand, Holland, and others in the last 3-4 years. We see whether it is ancient or it is modern, doesn't matter. Whether it is contemporary or not, that's what actually matters. And these materials are contemporary. If you want to teach critical thinking, every subject claims that they teach critical thinking. But if you want to teach critical thinking, we want to be critical in our own thinking. And in the last 30 years, 30 years back, 3 decades back, the period, if you take, the kind of critical thinking has a very ritual agenda to make it implemented. But now it is open. So while I was teaching my student, probably another YouTube teacher can teach from Stanford University, can teach far better than me. So the solution is that for me not to compete with him, but to ensure that I have a space to plug in that YouTube class in my agenda, in my problem. So he may not be able to come here and customize for my student in rural India. So there is a point for customization. There is ample opportunities for customization. This was not there 30 years back. This is number one. I'll just tell you one more change. Second is that there was no concept like designing your own degree. So now there is a flexibility for designing our own degree. This was not there even 5 years back. So this is going to have a tremendous impact if institutions cooperate and if you genuinely look at what are the flexibility options available for each candidate. And the third point is that the pathways given for each student, whether they are taking interdisciplinary courses or not, these pathways are largely facilitating grounds. So facilitating grounds from the transactional education, teacher teaches and other one receives and somebody is evaluating, this kind of transaction has gone. There is a possibility for co-creation, and co-creation was not possible 30 years back. I think these are the 3 major changes which we are going to see in the coming days also. The space and the scale of change will be more amplified in the coming days.
Thank you so much, Dr. Salil. On that note of opportunity and a lot of hope, I think it's 5 p.m. and we come to the close of today's session. We have only skimmed the surface. I think both the liberal arts space and the interdisciplinary space can keep all of us going easily for a few more hours, if not longer. But I hope that this has kind of given a sneak peek into the kinds of opportunities and explorations that exist within this environment. It's very exciting times ahead for all of us who choose to walk down this path, as all of our esteemed panelists have explained today. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Joya, Dr. Afroz, and Dr. Salil. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you so much, Yashaswini.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for all the participants and panelists.